Good evening, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. My name is Dr. Dennis Business, and tonight we're going to continue our dive into the last of the unholy trinity with Reaper's Creek. When we last left our hero, he was at his mom's house, ready to dig up some new dead bodies in the morning. This is so fucking weird. Chapter 19, Golden Man. I woke up alone to the sound of birds chirping outside. I could hear the water from the creek. If I wanted to, my grandmother's breathing could be heard next door if I really tried. I could also feel the radiant glow of death lining our creek bed. It was time to lose myself, my world. I was losing my hunger, losing my urges, growing beyond what I was before, day by day. I'm not even sure I cared. Walking out to the creek, the sun beamed down on my pale skin. I squinted only to wonder why. All I had to do was reprogram my eyes' tolerance for light. And like that, it was done. I could see everything. Eyes wide open, I slipped my bare feet into the water, and then I slipped my feet further into the rocks, the dirt, and shortly after my knees followed, then my hips, and my chest. I was fully submerged in the ground, moving freely. Everyone else had to respect the physical world. They had to adhere to the laws of it, not upset it or disturb it for the risk of repercussions. But I had yet to meet a physical mass I could not pass through. As I sank my head under the water, through the mud, with my mind I made the dirt disappear. Just as I had the water at the lake prior, I could see all the bodies hidden and misplaced. There were women down here. I counted 14 within a mile's radius. I would walk inside the earth and come across bones seemingly every 100 yards. Reaching through the dirt, liquefied to my touch, I felt the bones of every person. They were all put here by the same man. Gary. Most these women were previously working at strip clubs, paid to leave with the man, never to see their family or friends again. I rose above the dirt and water, planting my feet on the rocks in the creek bed, as if I were normal for a moment. I heard a familiar voice call out, "Daniel, what are you doing? You're soaking!" It was my grandma. I had found myself in front of her house, on my hunt for the victims of Gary. I shook my head, and as the water shot off in all directions, my hair extended outward, doubling in length. My hair turned from brown to golden blonde, and my skin heated till the water steamed off it, leaving me dry, still holding a piece of a woman's leg in my hand. My hair was so bright now, and flowed to my shoulders. But why? My grandma was speechless in seeing my transformation. I had no idea what would cause me to suddenly change like this. I simply desired to be as warm and dry as my comfort would see fit. But this change, this physical alteration, it felt right. As I lifted off the ground, I could see tears falling from my grandma's eyes. She was always religious, and probably felt I was blessed by her God. Unfortunately for me, I could not detect any gods. I could not see anything in the universe but common creatures. I was capable of so much, but I would be foolish to assume I was the most powerful being out there. I soared through the air, waiting for Gary's energy to reach out like a hand to guide me. As my legs trailed behind me, they grew, and my arms began to bulge, pressing against my white button-up shirt. Hairs punched out of my arms and legs and distracted by the fact I let myself fall from the air. Landing shoulder first in a Christmas tree crop, I groaned, even more confused about what was happening to me. I felt no pain. I was simply lost and concerned for what had taken over me. I was so used to being in control. I wanted to see my face, but couldn't, as I remained in my own body and had no reflection to look upon. Everything else was changing. I needed a much better look at myself, and there was a simple solution. My soul shot out of my body without hesitation, and I was immediately able to see a man with blue eyes, broad shoulders, at least 6 feet tall standing there. He looked like he was in his late 20s, almost double my age. I looked down at my soul. To my surprise, my body mirrored the man I had jumped out of. I had changed on every level without touching a line of code. Moving back into my body, I reminded myself of my agenda. I didn't want to waste time on my identity crisis while Gary was still out there. As I searched for Gary's energy standing in the field, I found myself humbled by fate. I was already within 500 feet of him. This field was his property. He was the person who ran the Christmas tree farm. Without a moment's hesitation, his throat was in my hand. I had split a line of his trees, ripping them up from the roots, destroying half his house as my body slammed through it, just to hold his neck in my right hand. I didn't want to dive into his mind. I didn't want to see what he had seen. I just wanted to know one thing. Gary gasped for air, so I released him and altered his body to have no response to gravity. He was helpless, floating in his own house. As I finished coating his body to suffer from paralysis in his weightless state, I asked him, "Why?" Gary was still able to move his mouth, and he used it to scream. "Who are you? What's going on?" I screamed back. "Why did you kill those women?" He yelled back. "You're the devil. You're here to claim me soul. It took you long enough, you damn bloody monster." His jaw was ripped off with my thoughts alone. As his tongue flung out and slapped against his chest, I removed his arms, legs, and all the bones in his torso. His screams sounded like the countless women he tortured and killed finding peace. They sounded like justice. The world didn't need him in it. In a mere breath's time, he ceased to exist as anything but ash on the floor of his half-demolished house. Gary was gone. However, on his walls he had pictures of all his friends, the men who looked just like him, mirroring his stretched-out plaid shirts and jeans far too small for his body. Looking at the photo, I planted their faces in my mind and closed my eyes. There were 7 men total who had collaborated with Gary. They didn't kill the women, but they knew what he did and covered for him every chance they could, providing burial locations, overwatch assistance, and even transportation. 5 of the men, I simply called for them to cease to exist, and in an instant, I felt an absence of their presence on Earth. The last 2 I wanted to see personally. I wanted an answer to my question. The first of the 2 men was named Raymond. He tried to meet me with a shotgun. Fortunately for him, it had no effect, considering the alterations I made the instant he lifted it up to me in his driveway. The moment he pulled the trigger, the butt of his gun exploded into pieces, shooting into Raymond's eyes. He fell screaming to the gravel rocks beneath my feet. I dove into his mind and saw Gary. I saw Raymond helping Gary load the bodies, and before I could even finish that thought, Raymond was gone. Buried in the rage I had felt when I saw him lifting those girls one by one, some drugged, some dead, destined to be buried and hidden from anyone who could help, with the exception of me. "What have you done? Where did Raymond go?" An older female cried out, having witnessed Raymond fall. In a glance, I sent the woman the same images I just witnessed, and without a single word from me, the woman began screaming in agony. Only generic, predictable words came from her mind. "Raymond, how could you? Why, Raymond?" I heard her repeat this over and over as she cried in her driveway. Her sound of sorrow trailed behind me as I flew towards the last person involved. Joseph. Joseph was sitting on his porch. He was using a breathing assistance device. Joseph had let his body go since meeting Gary. Right away, I knew he had been trying to eat himself to death the moment he learned of the first girl. It was clear to me Joseph would talk, so I walked up to him and asked, "Why did Gary kill all those women? Why did you help him?" Joseph began crying. I could see all the things he had done to help Gary get away with murder, but I could also see his face every second he was involved. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disgusted. All he was sad. I spoke to Joseph. "He killed your wife. He killed her before he ever made the deal with you." Joseph screamed back, "He said she was alive. He said he'd give her back." Following his words with sobbing and incoherent groans. Most anyone could do nothing for this man. I could also choose to do nothing. But instead, I sought out the soul of his wife and lured her to my side. As she stood beside me, I gave Joseph the ability to see her. In the world of the dead, she was happy, she was warm and comfortable. The moment Joseph saw this, his tears of pain turned to tears of joy. In that moment, I stopped his heart. As his body slumped forward, a much thinner man stood up and walked out of him. Joseph was whole again. Everyone who hurt those women was now dead. Although, unlike the other men, Joseph's soul remained intact. I began to fly home, leaving Joseph and his wife in each other's arms. In my attempts to leave, I felt a strong beam pull me off course. I could see it as yellow in color, and any resistance I tried to apply made me feel like a fly with his wings stuck to a tape, as if getting away would force me to leave a piece of myself behind. This force was stronger than any alien beam I had felt before. For the first time since gaining my abilities, I found myself completely helpless. Holy fucking... Oh... Chapter 20. God. I felt like I was covered in slime, laying on the ground, staring at a distant white light. The ground was hard, cold like ice. Hairline cracks I could barely sense ran through the white and black venous surface that seemed to stretch on for miles into the blackness that surrounded me. "You're not as powerful as you think, Daniel." A voice came up from the white glowing light above me. Looking up, I called back, "I didn't ask for any of this. I don't care about any of this." The voice shouted back, "Don't waste my time, Daniel." And with a thunderous boom, the light shot forward and smacked against the ground in front of me. I wanted to see what was beneath that light, so I altered my eyes to cut through whatever cloak this creature was putting up. Immediately time slowed in accordance with my will, and a skull riddled with decay was revealed beyond the light. The lower jaw of the skull was missing, and the spine of this creature was being held together by screws and metal bars. My vision went to white, then black, as the creature impacted the rock floor we stood upon. I corrected my eyes again to see a man standing before me with an aura that glowed yellow. His eyes shined blue and he wore a black and white striped suit. Only this suit seemed to have no ends, just like it faded into his bones. Beetlejuice. He spoke again. "I am an angel, and you are disrupting the order of our world. I replied immediately, you are no angel, you are death. I saw your rotting bones, and what you are showing me now is a lie. The creature stomped on the ground furiously and screamed back, what? How could you possibly? What are you? And shot his hand up in the air, clicking his fingers together. The healthy-looking man he was projected flickered to his boned form as he clicked. Silence fell on the room as his jawless face turned to me. I felt it smile even though the bones before me remained still. Upon the second echo of his clicked fingers bouncing through the black room, I felt my chest explode. My spine ripped out my back as my heart shot forward. My face turned to joy as my blonde hair thrusted backwards. I could only hope that this creature was going to lead me to the answers I craved. My upper body separated from the bottom, and my head smacked against the ground. My blood flew in all directions, even splattering against the creature dead stare. The Reaper silently walked towards my upper body and bent over to look into my eyes. I mouthed the words silently to him. I felt the confusion of the Reaper. He had no idea what I was trying to say. Laughter erupted through me, causing blood to shoot out of my mouth onto his skull again. I could read the mind of the Reaper now. I saw every life he took, every person he robbed of this world before their time, and in the most unforgivable ways. He watched groups of orphan children burn. He danced to the cries of women being invaded, violated, and murdered by forces from other countries. The order I was disrupting was not made up. There was in fact an order, and this Reaper designed the order to be merciless and indiscriminate. I wanted this Reaper, death itself, to understand what I was saying in my mangled state on the floor. So I altered the code to rattle his head with the sound of my amplified voice. The words I mouthed were, "Say goodbye to control," as the creature shook and screamed at the echoes of my voice exploding through his mind. He yelled back, "I am in control! I am death!" Altering the code, I summoned the creature and his screams with the gray material I designed myself in seconds. I created it to contain any force, including death itself. I bound the creature, controlling the mass with my mind, and as the gray material fully enclosed around this Reaper, I crushed him to the size of a child's marble. Still laying on the floor in pieces, the black rock in my head shot out of my defeated body and formed a new shell around it. I liked the body of the man that was thrust into me before, and kept his form. Walking over to the marble now, rolling around on the floor, I picked it up and held it in front of my face. I could still feel the energy of the creature inside. Unfortunately for the creature, however, it could not possess thought with its new condition. I had converted the existence of death into a crippled and impotent state. I had to alter the code of reality again to extract the origin of this Reaper from a state of compression that didn't exist before. As I scanned the data before me, I found the source of death. It aligned closely with what most humans considered God. But in the code, I also saw truth many had never imagined. God was not the source of all things. God was just another son. He created evil like death because he was evil himself. The devil never really existed, as people had believed for so long. The devil was just an aspect of God's divided personality, like anyone's father when he is in the worst mood. Every crime, every tear that fell, it was caused by God. He created death. He created our suffering, and he sent the Reaper to end me. The code before my eyes revealed God's face and the expression he had when he sent death to me. He was not too busy to handle this himself. He was just afraid. Diving deeper into the code, I could see God's father, a man by the name of Kull. Kull was unlike God in that God was flesh through and through. Kull, however, had no flesh in his skull whatsoever. It was comprised of a substance most any human would perceive as gas and dust. I searched for the code for God's location. However, 3 different locations came back to me. Without hesitation, I lifted my arm, directing my energy to my former body, laying there split in 2 on the floor. My former flesh united again, my skull filled with light, and closed to become whole again. I spoke to the old body as a new stone formed within its heart. You are everything I am not. You are compassionate where I am cruel. You are true when I am lost. But you are programmed just like everything else on this earth. The body spoke back in a soft and strong voice. I am here to serve you. I feel everything you are. Without instruction, the body shot through the seemingly endless black above us and ripped a hole as his body shot through the limits of the illusion death had surrounded us in. The body looked down on me as the walls of black flowed down to the ground, miles all around me like curtains being ripped from the windows in slow motion. The body's hair floated before the now exposed sun. He smiled on me as a tear slid down his face. I flinched my eyes at him and his smile faded. Within a blink, he was gone to confront one of the God locations. Now seeing the fabric walls fade around me, I could see I was very near where I was hit with the beam of energy earlier. My chains were lifted. I could feel my freedom again. The second and third God locations would be up to me. Picking one, I launched off the ground, cratering the rock left in my wake. As I flew at a blinding speed, I called for Julie to meet me miles outside my destination. She arrived seconds after I did. Julia walked towards me with a concerned expression. She knew who I was. She was already in my mind. I think you might be a little too old for me now, Daniel, she said with a smirk, observing my new appearance. I laughed and grabbed her by the throat. Light illuminated under my palm on her neck as she dove into my thoughts once more. I could feel Julia let herself get overtaken by fear. She spoke in my mind. You want me to kill God? I spoke aloud in response. I'll just put everything you need in your body. It'll attach to you in a way that cannot be separated by anything but me. Julie looked down at the ground as I released her throat. She began to cry. I could see I was out of line. Nope, not going to let him do it to me. Julie looked down at the ground as I released her throat. She began to cry. I could see I was out of line by asking so much of her. She had the tools now, but not the will. I spoke again. I've asked too much. This is my dysfunctional way of spending time with you. But clearly I didn't think about you before thinking of myself. Julie looked up and said again in my mind, Anything less screwed up I can do for you, Daniel? As she wiped away her tears from the stress I caused her. I held out my hand upside down and clenched. She reached out hers. A marble hit her palm. Julie looked up at me concerned. I spoke aloud again. That is the Grim Reaper. He is frozen in there and cannot escape. Hold on to him for me, won't you? Julie began to say something back, but couldn't finish her thought. I was already gone. The body had already concluded the first god location. I wanted to beat him to the others. Fuck. Chapter 21. The Hand of God. In an instant, I was already where I needed to be. Location coding is rather simple. I just didn't want to take my time traveling. I now stood behind a man who looked like what most would imagine God to be. A white silhouette that flickered black to white stood before me. A massive yellowish gold light beamed from around him. I felt him watching me, despite the appearance that he was not even facing me. There was no delay. Energy shot out of the god figure, and I immediately felt the rock in my head begin to take the blunt of his attack. The body instantaneously appeared, slamming into God in a body 5 times larger than he had before. It was too late to stop God from damaging my core existence. The attack he had jolted my head with, I was so underprepared. Collapsing on the white and yellow slabs of stone I found gods half standing on. My vision blurred, and I felt like I had to vomit, while simultaneously getting the sensation that black hole within my head was sucking my mind into itself. I heard a scream like I had never heard before. It wasn't coming from the body. I looked up with my failing eyes and saw God's hand explode into bloody shards for everyone to see. He had attempted to strike the body down, yet his violence turned on him tenfold without any reaction from the body. I could see God wielding a sword in his remaining hand as he reformed the other. He took a clear swing at the body, attempting to decapitate my creation. As the blade approached the body's head, God slowed until coming to a complete state of standing paralysis. His hand remained half-formed. His aura flickered like a light bulb in its last minutes. His whole body now frozen in place as if his muscles had become cement. It was clear the body had defeated the second half of God. As I felt relief, I allowed myself to collapse completely. Yet, I remained conscious. I could see the body walking over to me. His thoughts. I could not feel them anymore. I could not communicate with him or even sense his presence in the way I was used to. In his warm giant arms, I felt myself lifted. I dangled there like a child who had just fallen from his bike. The body walked away from the second god half. I looked back and saw the frozen man begin to crumble into shards of stone, then into dust, until eventually he was nothing. The body placed his hands over my eyes as I felt blood from my skull seep out of my forehead, trickling down into my ears as I remained limp in his arms. I heard popping noises, and I felt my bones being pulled out of my brain where the second god had crushed them into me. Only minutes passed, I was fully healed again. The body had taken me to a wooded area, far from where the last god fell. Placing me to a standing position, the body spoke. The first god was very informative. I quickly replied, Yes, clearly you learned some deal. You handled the second like he was nothing, but... The body interrupted me. The reason you can't read my mind, the reason you can't even sense me, is because to defeat the first god, I had to operate in an entirely different universe of code. For once in a long time, I was completely lost. I replied, Go on. The body nodded to me and continued. This world, everything we know here, it operates on system. One program. Everything on this world is accessible by you and me, but it is also accessible by the gods. I began to understand what the body was talking about. He was going to tell me that he had found a way to prevent the gods from altering his code. The body interrupted my thoughts. What you're thinking is somewhat true, but in reality, I don't even operate off code anymore. I am no longer a prisoner to programming. And just like that, I was completely lost again. The body continued. There is a realm of existence beyond our own, beyond the universe, beyond all we know. To put it simply, humans are to computers as I now am to humans. My existence is far more complicated than the comparatively simple lines of code you are designed with. I looked at the ground, feeling humbled. I replied, So, what you're saying is no one here can stop you? The last god will not be challenging whatsoever, no matter how strong he is. The body smiled and replied, only this time he spoke directly to my mind, sharing exactly what I needed to do to become like him. I immediately took advantage of the information he provided. Within seconds, I felt like my whole mind was being pulled into quicksand, and slowly after it, the remainder of my entire existence, my body, everything. Dropping to my knees, I grunted and struck the ground, as if someone had knocked the wind out of me. After the initial shock, my lost sense of the body returned. I could also feel the last of the three gods stronger than before. I could feel the presence of Julie, as if she was right in front of me. I knew exactly where David was, where all my teachers from school were. I knew the location of everyone and everything as if they were all a short reach away. So many things seemed like they were before. Instead of having to search for codes within the universe to answer whatever questions I had, I now only had to look within my own mind. I looked into the body's mind to see how the first god half was defeated. I was bombarded with images of the body nearly dying. I saw the first god attempt to cut off the body's head, just like the second had, only the first god was unsuccessful. Witnessing the image of the body appearing dead, I could see him now standing physically in front of me, with eyes of sadness. Diving back into the past, more images flooded in. The body had done what I had done. I learned from you, the body spoke up, interrupting my observation of what had happened. I gave the body the ability to do most anything I could do, and in that, he too created a replacement for himself, only while forming the new body. He multiplied its size and shifted his programming into a form the first god could not comprehend, and therefore could not alter or impact in any significant way. As the first god sliced every part of the original form of the body into pieces, his new shell was forming behind the unwitting deity. The first god could not detect the body, just like I could not. And without delay, the far larger form of the body crushed the first god half into sludge. The body then altered the second god's code to become divided so thinly that it could be blown away as meaningless fragments of trash in the wind. Before he could finish full absorption of all the information, the body was already up to something new. With a mere thought, he had delivered the last god to us, already paralyzed, but clearly very much so awake. Standing before us, the last god was paralyzed, not just by the power of the body, but also frozen in his own terror. The body allowed the god to speak. "You are punishing me, aren't you? Haven't you done enough?" God shouted. I looked at the body, cueing him to speak for me. The body smiled slightly, Feeling honored, his creator wanted him to speak to God in his place. But I knew the body was well aware that I remained humble, as he evolved faster than even me. The body spoke. You invented everything wrong with this world. Countless humans and other animals have been slaughtered under your watch. Children dying of cancer, mothers crying as their half-formed children fall from their bodies, innocent people drowning in your floods, burning in your fires. Tell me, God, does the devil even really exist? Because I can't sense him anywhere. God laughed, and the body interrupted his laughter. It was a rhetorical question, God. I'm well aware there is no devil. I'm well aware if there was a devil, he would have been one of the first god halves I already killed. I'm well aware that you are a failure of your father Krull, and I know that this world wasn't even your creation, but rather a creation of the sister you murdered, the daughter of Kull, and you took her life right before the first genocide you committed against her creations. God screamed as spit poured out his mouth. How can you possibly know that? You're the creation. You're the creation of a boy in a man's body. You've existed for only days. And you can tell me who I am? My sister was scum. She was everything my father wanted. And my father is scum too. As I watched the body continue to scold God, I could see what the body was seeing. God not only killed his sister, he also violated her body. He killed her in his own shame as a result of what he did to her. He was jealous of his father's love for his sister, and he wanted to do everything he could to claim the power his sister wielded. He wanted to ruin her, and out of jealousy, he did every horrible thing he could to her before ending her very existence. I interrupted the body. God, Cain versus Abel, Lucifer versus humans, those are stories of you. Confessing what you did, but simply placing names on people made up to take the blame instead of you. It wasn't Lucifer who wanted to torment humanity. It wasn't Lucifer who was jealous of how much humans were loved. It was you. It wasn't Cain who resented Abel. That too is a projection of yourself. A sad, sad man who wanted everything his sister had. God was glaring directly into my eyes at this point. No energy came from them. No threats. No fight in him at all. He was shamed. He was defeated. And looking into his eyes, with only a thought, I turned his bones into ash. His skin, his muscles, flowed to the ground like a puff of steam, sliming up the floor, eventually becoming unnoticeable. Looking up at the body, I asked, "Do you know anything about Kull that I do not?" The body replied, "I know you think I might have the ability to hide something from you, but I gave that up when I made you like me. I did this because you hid nothing from me, so I cannot do any less for you." I looked at the ground, where God once stood. I spoke under my breath. So those who God drowned in the flood, they were actually the original creations of his sister. They were perfect versions of us, and God thought he could do better. Yet God wound up making so many of us just like him. So my question is, the body spoke back. Why did Kull willingly create a monster like God? Fuck, why did God create a monster like you? Fucker. That was chapters 19, 20, 21, and 22 of Reaper's Creek. These chapters are the scribblings of an idiot. We were in the Matrix, and next thing you know, we're at fucking Zeus's house. And he's killing his sister. But on the bright side, we only have 2 more chapters left, and we will take care of that next time. Because this has been Doctorpiece Theater. And my name is Dr. Dennis Business. Only 2 more chapters, my friends.